Hi kids, how are you today? Today's topic is asking polite questions. And of course, we need to ask polite questions, particularly when we are asking something to a stranger. I mean, to a person that we don't know and we want to be polite with them. Or even if we know them, but still we need to be polite because he is someone we respect a lot. So today we're going to learn how we can ask these kind of questions, especially if we are in a new city or in a place where we don't know everybody and we need to ask strangers for help. So let's get started. Take a look at these two sentences, these two groups of sentences on the on the screen, and I want you to tell me what the difference is between the first way of saying the sentence and the second way. For example, what is the difference in saying, where is the nearest ATM? Or saying, can you tell me where the nearest ATM is? Do you guys remember that the ATM stands for automatic teller machine, and it is the place where we use our card and we can put it there and withdraw money, right? An ATM is usually outside a bank or next to a shopping mall or something like that, right? Very good. What about the second one? What is the difference between asking someone, what time is it? Or asking someone, would you mind telling me what time it is? So, what do you notice? What is the difference between the first form and the second one? Any ideas? Well, you probably guessed, right? I mean, this sentence sounds very informal. Where's the nearest ATM? You can say that sentence maybe to a close friend or to a family member that you know and are very familiar with. But if you are dealing with a stranger or with when someone that you respect a lot and you want to sound more polite, this is the best one because it sounds more formal, more polite, more respectful, right? Can you tell me where the nearest ATM is? So, today we are going to analyze this form of making questions that we call indirect questions. Why? Because you're not asking like the question directly, like this one, but you are kind of being a little bit more indirect. Remember, the most indirect you are, the more polite you sound, okay? So let's check what the structure is. Okay, first of all, how to make an indirect question. First, we need an expression to introduce the question. We can start by saying, I was wondering. I was wondering means like, me preguntaba o me pregunta si. Or you can say, can you tell me? Or if you want to sound even more polite, you can say, could you tell me? Or you can also say, oh, do you know? Or a little bit more straightforward, you can say, oh, I'd like to know. Or finally, you can say something like, do you have any idea? So those five phrases, they are the most common examples on how you can introduce a polite question, okay? So in order to make an indirect question, you would need to use one of these expressions for starters, okay? Again, if you want to make an indirect, a polite question, you start with one of these. The one that you prefer and the one that you feel like it's going to be more appropriate for the occasion. Okay, so what after that? Well, now we have to remember that there are in general two kinds of questions. One of them are the WH questions, or we can also call them the information questions, right? Either way you prefer to call them, the WH questions usually begin with a WH word or a WH expression. Where, when, what, which, who, how, what time, what color, how often, etc. Those are the WH questions, the ones that ask you for certain information. So we have a very common WH question that you might need if you are traveling to a different city. That is, what's the nearest ATM? You remember the ATM, the automatic telling machine? What we would say in Spanish, el cajero automático, right? And let's analyze how to transform this into an indirect question. First of all, obviously, as I just told you, you need to include one of the expressions. For example, can you tell me? After I put the expression, I need to add the WH question. In this case, the WH question is where? But then comes the magic. After that, we are going to need to make a very slight change in the structure of this question. We already know since first semester that the correct structure of a question is first the verb or the auxiliary and then the subject, right? So that's why I have WH question and then verb is and then the subject, the nearest ATM. But when we are talking about indirect questions, we are going to switch them back to their original place. Es decir, after the WH question, we need to write the subject, in this case, the nearest ATM, and then the verb or auxiliary is. So in this case, we get like kind of an inverse question. Can you tell me where the nearest ATM is? If you notice, this is the structure of a normal affirmative sentence. First subject and then the verb. And that is the form we are going to use in an indirect question. And then we close the question mark. Attention. The question mark in this case is going to depend on my introductory phrase. Es decir, for example, if I begin with the expression, I was wondering, no le tengo que poner question mark at the end. Can you tell me? Yes, question mark, because it's a question. Do you know? Question mark. I'd like to know? No question mark. Do you have any idea? Question mark. So the fact of putting a question mark here is going to depend entirely on what introductory phrase I use. Let me give you another example with WH question. For example, what time is it? Again, I start with my introductory phrase. In this case, I decided to say, would you mind telling me? And again, the first WH question, what time? Then the subject, que en este caso es it, and then the verb. A diferencia de verb y subject, primero subject and then verb, okay? Exactly the same structure. Okay, let's move on. What about a WH question that involves an auxiliary like does? For example, what time does the museum open? Okay, attention. A structure of an affirmative. So my introductory sentence, do you have any idea? Then WH question, what time? And then, ¿se acuerdan? Subject. ¿Cuál es el subject? The museum. And then the verb. What is the verb? Opens. ¿Por qué no lleva auxiliary? Because this is an affirmative structure. And in an affirmative structure, we don't need auxiliary in simple present. I only need the letter S because the museum is a third person. Okay? Very good. So I hope this is clear. You can go back and you can ask me if you have any questions. Okay, and then finally, let's talk about the yes, no questions, okay? Now, when we are talking about yes, no question, this structure is going to change a little bit, okay? So, sorry. First of all, we need to remember that the yes, no questions, they don't include a WH question. I mean, they don't have the words like where, when, what. They are not included in the yes, no question, okay? So a yes, no question, it's called yes, no, because the only possible answers are yes or no, okay? No more information, any other possibility of answering, only saying yes or not. Okay, so let's take a look at the first example that says, is there a convenience store near here? Do you guys remember what a convenience store is? Like an OXXO, an Extra, a 7-Eleven, right? Those stores that are usually open 24/7, I mean, all day, every day. That's a convenience store. And they sell like a little bit of everything, right? Very good. So, this is the normal question structure. Is there a convenience store near here? What about if I want to make it indirect? If I want to make it more polite? Well, I start with my introductory phrase. Do you know? And now the difference is that after the introductory phrase, I am going to use the word if. Okay? Do you know if? And then after the word if, that it didn't exist in the original question, I begin again with the subject first. Instead of verb and then subject, voy a hacer lo mismo. First subject, there, and then verb, is. And then the rest of the sentence is exactly the same. Do you know if there is a convenience store near here? Okay? Very good. So let's take a look at one more example of yes no questions, and hopefully you will be ready to answer the exercise. Here we go. Okay, so for example, what happens if you ask someone, can you help me with the modal verb can in a direct question? And you would like to make it a little bit more polite. So you can say, I was wondering, for example, you can use any introductory phrase that you want. And remember, again, the word if. I was wondering if, y va de nuevo. First the subject. En vez de modal and then subject, in this case, we go subject first. I was wondering if you can help me. Again, like the affirmative structure. So I hope this has been clear. You can watch it again. You can watch it as many times as you want, or you can text me. You can ask me and let me know if I can help you with something a little bit more specific. Good luck.